which is making use of flexible formwork to extrude columns in prefabrication. And there's binder jet printing for formwork. So these are all examples of DFAB technology, so additive manufacturing used in the production of building elements. When looking at the entire process, though, of these digital fabrication methods, there are many steps beyond the core DFAB application. And in basic research, it's most important to prove the concept, so those might not actually have the full attention, but for industrial application, all process steps matter. By analyzing the whole manufacturing process, we identified categories that are important to industry when considering investment in a new technology. You can see here, for example, there's a 3D printed formwork, but it's manually sprayed with concrete. And after that is complete, of course, there's also the question of how to remove the formwork, as you can see on the right. What we found when we were looking at all those processes that I illustrated before was a set of evaluation categories that we can use to answer this question. So we have a total of 11 categories, and these break down roughly into 3 groups. The first group is what can the technology do? And this includes freedom of design. So how many different things can you produce? Surface quality, how much is the surface quality impacted by the kind of production method we use? How many functions can you embed? And what are the structural properties? The second group is what does it take? So what are the resources it takes in terms of time, workforce, material, and equipment in order to get this process set up and going? And the third group is how does it work? And that's the manufacturing process itself, where we're looking at the production procedure. So how many steps are there? What's the scalability in terms of the size or the volume of the elements you can make? And what's the versatility, meaning how many different products can you actually produce using this type of technology you're using? And then this is the categories. And we were thinking now in the next step, how can we create a framework for industry to evaluate those categories? Or in other words, how can we help them answer the question, how can DFAB help our business? Now here we can see one of our industry partners talking about their dissatisfaction with the current process. So this is a conventional process, and this is one of the companies that came to us to work with us to figure out if there's another way. And such companies considering DFAB need a simple way to understand and compare the complex and developing technologies that are available. So in order to help them answer the question how DFAB can help them, we developed a 4-point rating scale for each of the categories that we had found. And here you see one example in terms of the workforce, which is very important consideration in the industry. So very high means this is still very high labor intensive, even though you're using DFAB. Step 2 is it requires still requires manual tasks or permanent supervision. And then there's the moderate step 3, where there's only a little bit of manual involvement or supervision, and then 4 would be highly automated, which means very low workforce required. So if you think of this 4-point rating scale for all of the categories, this resulted in a tool to self-assess needs in the industry and to compare potentials of new technologies. So here on the left, we can see how a company, one of our partners, assessed their own needs. You can see in the spider chart that there's a lot of importance on scalability, structural properties, freedom of design and such. But this company, for instance, felt like the workforce, the automation was not as important. And for instance, the equipment like requirements were not as important. So this is actually a classic profile of a concrete prefabrication contractor. And on the other hand, you can use the same tool to assess a new technology that's available, or the provider of that technology can actually input their data on what they think the technology can do. You can see two profiles of two of the technologies we've looked at before. That's FDM printed formwork and BinderJet printed formwork. So you can compare those to each other, and you can also compare them to your own needs profile, as you can see illustrated here. So this way, we're providing an early stage overview of possible DFAB solutions and the potentials and trade-offs compared to a future user's needs. In the future, we see more research potential here. So this research only allowed us to develop a very early stage perspective on the evaluation categories important in industry adoption of construction DFAB. But in the future, we see a lot of potential to first further refine this framework based on a more diverse sample of technologies. So not just on the technologies that we've looked at here in our internally at our research institution. We see a chance to quantify some of these categories, for example, productivity, to allow industry a more informed decision-making process and also better comparison to their existing processes. And we also think that in a further step, we need to include more sustainability parameters in the rating system to reflect their growing importance in technology adoption decisions, where it's actually these factors become more and more central to the decision-making process. And with this, I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy about your questions.